Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness. And Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my awesome co-host, Donovan. And today we were talking about happiness through different periods of life. As we age, what makes us happy might change and evolve. So Donovan, where do you want to start with this? How was happiness like when you were a kid?
Yeah, I feel like, as a kid, there are so many less just inputs, really. There's so many less things going on or at least for me, there was so far fewer things going on in my head around like things that I needed to get done or what I wanted or whatever else. So it seemed like the equation for at least, the short-term version of happiness, like these joyful feelings, it's pretty cut and dry, right? It's pretty much like, especially when you're like a really little kid, which I don't have a ton of memories of, but some of just like, oh, I want ice cream. Like that sounds good. Don't really need to focus on anything else. If I get ice cream, my life is going to be awesome. If I don't, like that's horrible. But it also seemed like those cycles were much faster, which is to say that, I wasn't sitting there thinking like, okay, how am I going to invest the $10 I got over the next 10 years to increase my wealth so that I'm able to like purchase more things and have a better quality of life? It's very much like, I want ice cream. Okay, I forgot about that. Like, I want to watch this thing. Oh, it's over. Now I want to, like the cycles of goal setting were much, much shorter. Those are some of my initial thoughts. I'd be curious where you're at.
Yeah, I feel like, I think we're both blessed in that we didn't have like a super traumatic, abusive childhood. So I didn't have to stress, or that didn't like wane my happiness. So simple things could actually make me very happy. Like when you said the ice cream example, I immediately thought of not just getting ice cream, but getting it from the ice cream truck and hearing the sound and knowing they're in the neighborhood and trying to rush to your parent to grab money to be able to rush out there and get the ice cream that you want. And if you actually achieve that, that seemed like mind-blowingly amazing and joy inducing for sure. And yeah, I feel like when I think about moments that made me happy as a kid, it was typically maybe food related, because the other thing that I thought of was when my dad made French toast, which was once in a while. It was like a special occasion. It always felt special. Yeah. But then I think about like what has made me happy as an adult. I agree. It maybe takes longer, or there's different outlets. French toast will still make me happy today. If someone made me some French toast, I would be thrilled. But I usually think of achieving longer term goals. Like the moment I graduated from med school, that was like a huge achievement that took years and years and years of school to get that point. So that was a huge moment of elation and happiness once I got to that end point. Versus a child, I'm not even trying to get through first grade or second grade. I'm just trying to like get to recess day by day. I'm not even really thinking about it. I just go through the motions, and I'm not like, yeah, I finished first grade. That's awesome. So that has definitely changed and evolved.
Yeah, I feel like as you were speaking about it, it kind of highlighted to me that one of the pros and cons of, having like a childlike nature, right, is you're very, very tapped into the moment, right? Very, very present, and for better or worse, right? Like very involved in whatever it is that is coming next.
Right.
And I feel like that's some of what we try to recapture with stuff like mindfulness training and meditation and those things is some of that, because, it's not often now that I actually wrangle my mind well enough or focus well enough to enjoy something like ice cream, right? Unless it's like a very special occasion. My baseline is probably going to be lost off in thought, thinking about other stuff or doing whatever else, and not as mindful as sort of those moments when I was younger and it was easier to tap into. I wanted to ask you sort of a follow-up question, which is, how do you think sort of the experiences that you had as a kid have shaped the way that you experience happiness now as an adult?
Yeah, that's a tricky question, because I think I concur with your sentiment about it. As a child, you're more present in the moment, so it's just like easier to be happy. Maybe it seems harder, or not harder, but just there's more and expanded avenues of achieving happiness. Because like those simple things can still make you happy, but at the same time, there's also a lot more weight and responsibility from life that can prevent you from being happy. Or there's also hormonal changes and life changes and things like that. I actually, the other day on Sunday, I was feeling down for whatever reason. Actually, I didn't even really know. I couldn't particularly identify a specific reason. I was just feeling down. And so the thing that I know that sometimes helps me feel better in those moments is just to go to like the local river beach and just hang out with my dogs. And I did just that, and it did make me feel better. So I've already forgotten your question, so I don't know if I completely answered it or not. Yes.
I think it answered it somewhat, but I'll do it again and see if you
Yes.
wanted to add anything, which is
Yeah.
just sort of how you feel your childhood experiences shaped or influenced the way that you either experience or pursue happiness as an adult.
I think, there are moments, like, I guess going back to my example, sometimes I do think trying to simplify it can sometimes make it better. Like, yeah, go back to the basics of things that bring you joy. So playing with dogs, going to the beach, simple things. It doesn't have to be super complicated or anything like that. Or yeah, if someone made me, although I just added like a complication in my brain, because I was like, oh yeah, someone giving me French toast right now would be like, make me happy. But then there's like the complication of being an adult and like having the guilt of, oh, this is so many calories, this is so many carbs, this is so much sugar, can I do this? And there's the other factor of being an adult, is that there's a phase in your life where you can eat anything and you're an adult, because there's no parent restricting you from eating whatever you want. And so you can enjoy that pleasure until your body says, not anymore. And so I'm at that phase of life where I can enjoy like an indulgence once in a while, but I can't just be eating French toast day in, day out every single day, because that wouldn't be so great for my body probably in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, it's a, as a kid, it's a version of sort of mindfulness or presence, right, without any of the even understanding of some of the potential consequences, right? Like,
exactly.
there are a number of these things that are pleasurable in the moment, and we've talked about this before, but don't have great long-term payoffs. And even as a kid, you'll still face those effects depending on the scope of what you're doing, right? Like if you literally just eat candy all day and it's a lot of candy, you will start feeling the effects pretty quick.
Probably, yeah.
But so just to, I had a couple pieces I wanted to add to the question I asked you, just from my experience, which is, you mentioned like growing up in an environment that was like not abusive or crazy or anything, but I did grow up in an environment that we were very poor, right? Like we didn't have money to get a lot of things. And I feel like that has made it much, much easier for me as an adult to look for sort of joy or satisfaction outside of material things, because the way I was raised, I never like had a ton of things, right? And it also made it easier for me to not get caught up on things like, oh, am I wearing the right fashion, right? Because having only whatever set of clothes I had to pick from as an adult now, I'm just like, it doesn't really matter. Like I've lived through the experience and I know that it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter what I pick. So things like that sort of, those pieces were easier for me. But then, there are things that are harder from that, like coming from that scarcity mindset, spending money on things that would genuinely make my life better sometimes is a bit of a struggle for me, because I sort of, as a kid, taught myself, like, no, you, like, having restraint around sort of desire for things is going to be very powerful. But I overcorrected on that. And so even the things I have desire for that seem like they would make my life better, there's that, like, root that's like, I don't know, you probably don't need that, right? You don't need it. And if you don't need it, then you don't have to get it. So, like, you could probably skip it and be fine, which is true, except that I'm also in a stage where I have enough resources and enough money that buying those things will make my life better at no cost, right? It's not like, I'm not gonna be able to eat if I buy whatever that thing is. So that's one of the ones that sort of stuck out to me that I was thinking about as I asked you the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can really relate to that experience a lot, in that I wouldn't say we were exactly poor, but we weren't rich for sure. Or it was just simply my parents lived in that scarcity mindset, so we just tend to be very frugal. We never went out for dinner. We ate in most of the time. Once in a while, maybe we would get fast food, but it was a rare occasion. And although my parents did kind of, I guess their smaller splurges was that they did make it a point to have like regularly annual family vacations. So I'm thankful that they instilled that desire to travel in me. Although now as an adult, I do think I still have that frugal mindset, and to some extent, but I feel like compared to my parents, I'm a lot more lax about it. Like, I do eat out probably once, maybe twice a week. So that's probably 300 times more than what I did when I was a kid. So that, I guess, might be excessive. But I honestly feel like it doesn't necessarily, maybe because I do it way more frequently than I did as a kid. And I think frequency makes a difference. Like, if you're getting something all the time, it's not going to bring you the same joy as if it was like once a year kind of a thing, like Christmas. Like, you're not going to be as enthralled with Christmas if Christmas happened every single day. And so me eating out, it's not like, oh yeah, this is like a really exciting venture. I mean, yeah, I'm happy I'm going to have an enjoyable time, but it's not going to elicit the same type of like super excitement and happiness as it would have if I did it less frequently. But similarly, I'd say I'm thankful that I think my parents instilled not being too attached to material things and not having material things like stuff bring us happiness and joy. Generally, I think I'm thankful that both me and my husband tend to be more minimalistic on the stuff side, but where we spend our money is more on like food, dining experiences, and travel probably. Is the thing that we like it, because it's more of the experience, and that tends to bring me joy. But I also feel like, do we overdo it because it's not bringing me, like, if we did it just once a year versus like once a week, that would be a different experience. So that's what I'm toying with in my brain right now.
Yeah, and I have the same sorts of calculations and way I weigh things out and try to compare things and whatever. And maybe that's a good point to try to interject some childlike moments, right, where it's more just like, what sounds nice right now, what's gonna work. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. So a lot of that is the same type of stuff that shaped me. I think I mentioned one of the things that I escaped was like sort of being attached to material stuff. But one of the things that I caught very strongly was this like feeling or desire or need to earn a lot of money, right? Like when I was younger, I thought that I needed a six-figure salary to like be able to make a living, to be able to have a good life, because the times that I did run up against money being a barrier to things, not that I wanted, but that I needed, right? Like one memory that stands out very clearly in my mind is going to the food bank or getting food from the food bank, opening it later and finding that it was like full of bugs or had mold or whatever else. Like I have a small handful of memories like that. And just thinking to myself, like, I have to make a bunch of money when I'm older.
Mhm.
So I fell into that trap really, really hard. But turns out you don't need like a boatload of money to be able to have a decent life, right? To be able to afford a place to live and food.
Right.
For some people, that's the point that they're at, but you don't need to be in the top 1% of people to have those things. Anyway, I just bring it up because that's one of the traps I fell into because of my upbringing and the way that I was like sort of looking for happiness, or more accurately trying to avoid misery. And it took me a very long time to get out of that mindset, and realize that those aren't necessarily the things that drive happiness for me, right? There was so much of that in my childhood around like, cool, well, I want to make sure that I don't lack resources. Like I don't need much and I can figure out how to make do with almost nothing.
Mhm.
But less than almost nothing is like really sucks. And I didn't have the worst life growing up. I didn't have like
Yeah.
it was not that terrible. We were not like crazy poor, right? I mean, yeah, we went to the food bank, but I had food. Like I didn't starve.
Mhm.
I wasn't going hungry or anything. But in my mind as a child, like relative to my other experiences, that was like the lower end of it. And I think maybe that's another topic we could maybe open up a little bit. But that sort of baseline as a kid set a lot for me moving forward. I'd be curious if you kind of feel the same in terms of the experiences you had as a kid, sort of setting your idea of what life should look like.
Mhm. Yeah. I don't feel like as a kid I had this urge to make a lot of money. But I think it more so developed maybe later in life, maybe late teens or early 20s, where it's like, oh, your worth is tied to how much money you make. And then it took a lot more years to like realize that it actually not the case. So it was an evolution in that sense versus, yeah, I don't even think it was really that like on my mind, or really I think it was, yeah, you should have a good career, but it wasn't so much about the money, at least in my head as a child, versus as an adult it kind of shifted. And yeah, I think I've gotten to a similar point as you where I don't feel like I need to necessarily make six figures. I have had moments like that where it's like, yeah, I gotta make six figures because I'm a doctor and all that, and it's gotta like the prestige and the thing. And it's just, my partly influenced by my significant other in that he's been wanting to like work part-time, and I've been kind of like in this idea, no, I want to work full-time. I want to work full-time as a doctor so I can make those six figures. But he's actually kind of reined me in. I think we both want to work part-time. And yeah, maybe we're making half as less, but we're still making enough to be comfortable, have enough resources. We've never had to worry about food or a roof over our head. And yeah, we want to be able to go out and do things and enjoy our time and be able to have time to plan fun activities or trips and things like that. So that's what's shifted for me over the years.
One of the things that sounds similar, you can tell me if it's off, but it sounds like we both sort of had this experience of like over time or during certain transitions, having sort of a grasp on something that does provide happiness, but then like losing it a little bit to another close idea. So for example, like wanting to be secure, right? And then thinking like, oh, secure means six figures, and then getting locked on six figures for a while. And then it taking a while after that to be like, wait a minute. Like, is this the actual thing that I want?
Mhm.
Because at least for me, I'll just speak for myself, but during some of these transitionary periods is when I've really lost the target, right? Where I've gone from like, well, I want to make sure that I'm able to get food,
Yeah.
right? Like get food that doesn't have bugs in it. and
Yes.
somehow skipped some steps and then was like, okay, I need to make $1 million. Right. And like
Yeah.
missed all the pieces in between that are like, do I want to work that much to earn that much money?
Right.
How am I going to use that money? What am I going to do with it that will actually improve my life instead of staying anchored towards this thing that I actually do care about, which is like, I want to make sure that I have this minimum standard of living, but then never taking the time to sort of connect the dots or draw out sort of the details to see if those two things lined up.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just noticing a pattern in that as a child, and I mean we've kind of already said this, but I don't really remember having many goals as a child or really pursuing things. It was just I don't even remember like pursuing happiness. It was just like it happened when it happened. And I was like, cool. If it didn't, and then it was just go on with life. I don't remember, but I mean, my childhood was a while ago. Versus now, it's like okay, it was a while ago. Versus now, it's like okay, what makes me happy, and really have like ponder about it and really think about it and inquiry and pursue it versus like back then it was more of a like hey, oh, there's ice cream in my hand, yeah. Like I don't think I was in the active pursuit of ice cream usually, but it was more of like oh, if it's coming around or my mom gives it to me, um then cool, awesome, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like over time I have so the way that I would describe what you just said is like as a kid I felt very hooked into my experiences and emotions. Like I was just hooked in along for the ride and whatever happened. There wasn't a whole lot of time like stepping back outside of that to sort of I don't know, consider the broader picture and the implications and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like I spent a lot of time trying to find ways to sort of uh, over time detach from sort of those like stories and feelings. But I think at a rate or at a intensity that's too strong, which is to say that like I really trained myself to like, okay, I'm not going to get hooked into these experiences and emotions as much so that I can remain like calm and collected and cool and think about things and make the right choice and whatever else. And I think that has over time come at the cost of sort of what we talked about, like I actually kind of have a hard time now tapping into sort of the moment and getting excited about those experiences and getting like hooked in and having sort of the ride of certain experiences and emotions. And that's like something I'm actively working on now is, you know, with meditation and this stuff, like trying to be more present and more mindful. And I don't really have anywhere specific that I'm going with it, but besides that, that's kind of been the journey of their trajectory, right? At some point realizing as a kid, like, wow, I'm hooked in all the time and I'm not necessarily making good choices. And then going so far the other way to be like, wow, I'm never really locked into the moment. And then trying to claw my way back into sort of a more healthy or useful sort of balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can really relate to that experience in that. Yeah, I mean I don't have the same. I don't know. It's like good and bad having the emotional highs and lows. Like it was easier for you to get upset by stupid things as a child too. Like, oh, my brother took my toy. It's like after, and then just like freaking out about something so simple and small. But I agree that not being able to be as present in the moment and tap into that and just have like all this kind of baggage that kind of comes along with like trying to get there or overthinking it, and that tends to get in the way of being present in the moment and just really appreciating the moment um as much as you would as a child, you know.
So while we're on this topic, I'd be curious if you, I guess off the top of your head, noticed any other sort of transition or reflection points, right? Like we've kind of been talking a lot about, at least in my head, like a little kid, like a toddler to maybe elementary school type of age. Um, and I would just be curious if you saw any other like major transitions around happiness in your life.
I kind of just thought of my middle school years, which I describe as my dark ages, honestly, because it was really, it's like you're like a mini adult. You're not an adult, but you're not a kid anymore. You're in this early teen phase. And for me, I was very insecure. Um, I base my value on if I fit in with my friends or not. And that was very challenging because I had some friends that were not so warm and empathetic where it was just about you're in or you're out. And like I remember there was like this one person in our friend group that would just like decide randomly in the girl group that like this person's out because she wore this or she did that or something superficial. And then eventually our girl group of, I don't know, a decent size like whittled down to 3 people, and then I got kicked out. So then it was like the whole group dismantled itself. And so I don't remember being super happy as a middle schooler, or I'm trying to think of moments, which is kind of sad, which I don't know. It's been a long time. But honestly, that transition, it was a good thing for me because it kind of had me want to pursue a different high school than all those other people. I just like wanted a fresh start. And then I made some really more authentic friendships when I started high school with some new people that I met. I'm actually still friends with some of them today. Like Sandra's my high school bestie that we connect with every now and then. And yeah, I think that's where when I didn't feel like I had to try so hard to fit in, where I could be more of myself, that's where I felt like happiness started to come back a little bit. But I'm trying to think of like, were there any moments that got me really elated and excited? Like even then, at that point, as a teen, I'm not that excited for Christmas. You are when you're a kid, but as a teen, I'm like, oh, I don't need more socks, whatever. Like, whatever. I don't need to wake up at the crack of dawn to open presents. I'm like, I'll just wake up when I wake up. That's fine. Kind of a thing. So, yeah. I'd have to think about that a little bit more, but that's what came up for me.
Yeah, it sounds like the big transition there was from sort of, and there was probably this to a degree before, but not so much that you distinctly remember it, but from sort of experiences, like personal experiences or individual experiences, towards this sort of like social set of experiences around like expectations around like fitting in or like how other people were judging you, right? And I'm sure that happened some in elementary school too, but just not in a way that it you remember it as much, right?
Right.
Or at least, you know, I vaguely remember a couple times of people being like, I don't want to play with you, being like, okay, I don't care. Like there's other kids out here, like, see ya. Whereas in middle school, that tends to like gain some more weight. So for me, I think the biggest transition period, or at least one that we haven't talked about as much, was after I had graduated college. And the reason for that is it was the first point for me that life wasn't just sort of planned, right? I felt very confident and good about my life up to that point because I had just sort of decided like, okay, I'll just focus on school. Like that's what I'm doing is school and I'll get good grades. And then I was lucky enough to have my brain work well enough to get good grades. And so like up until the point I graduated college, you know, there were highs and lows and whatever else. But for the most part, I was just very on this like, okay, you just do what people do, which is go to school and get good grades. But after I graduated is when it really hit me around like, whoa, you can really just do whatever you want. Like there's not a path, you know, and some people probably realize that graduating high school, but for me, it took a few more years. And that was a big moment of a big period of just a lot of reflection around like happiness and things like that. Because before that, it was just so clear of like, you just do what you're supposed to do, you know, right. In quotes, supposed to do. But that was probably the first time I actually sat down and thought about like, what makes me happy? What do I want to do? What seems to be a good use of time? And then colored with all these other things we talked about, like, well, I want to make sure I make enough money that I, you know, they're still like, oh, 6 figures. I need 6 figures. And then as I got like my first job and made, I don't know, $15 an hour or whatever I made, and was totally able to pay my bills and live somewhere. I was like, oh, maybe this one isn't what I need. And anyways, a lot of those things that I had been chasing or that I had held up in the back of my mind sort of started dissolving and opened up things around sort of what do I actually want? Because I saw that's also the first time that I sort of started to see the traps that I was in and the traps that other people were in, right? Where I was able to start paying for my stuff and be like, I don't really need a 6-figure job. Like, it will let me buy some more stuff, but I don't need it. And maybe it's not what I should be chasing, but watching other people go and like, oh, I gotta finish grad school so that I can become a lawyer, so that I can make this much money, so that I can do this, and like seeing these other sorts of traps that people were in, because a lot of the people weren't on trails that were making them happy. Some people were, but a lot of them weren't. But that's when things just really opened up for me.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar experience, not because I continued on after my undergrad to medical school, which was just a very clear linear path of you just do this test, you write this paper, rinse, repeat, and just keep going. And they tell me what to do and I do it. And it was just, then you get your degree. And thereafter it was like, oh, now I have freedom to do whatever I want. I could start my own business. I could work for someone else. It was a lot of avenues, which partly I'm grateful for, but the other part was like, I don't know which path is the right path for me. In a way, it's not so linear and clear of like, oh, do this paper, do this thing, and do your check marks. It was like all these expanded options, and I had to explore several of them and figure out what's working, what's not, what do I like, what brings me joy, what doesn't. And it's, to this day, it's still kind of still figuring it out to some degree, even though I finished med school 10 years ago. So because there's also been a lot of life transitions in that I moved from Seattle, I had a practice out there, and then Maryland for 4 years. That I moved out there for a relationship. That relationship didn't work out. I moved to California. Just like my life has shifted a lot. So I think where I'm at now, though, in that transition of realizing that it's like, yeah, I don't need to make like crazy amounts of money. I don't need to work myself to the bone. I just want to be comfortable. I want to be able to enjoy my family. I want to be able to do things and take trips still. And I still want to be a doctor and help people and make a difference. But I don't need that to be my sole existence 40, 60, 80 hours a week anymore, which I'm grateful for. That I want a little more of a balanced life at this point.
Yeah. And I think it's something that, having talked to people, we're only as far in life as we are, but having talked to people who are even further in life, I think it continues to be something that just sort of gets mapped out as you go. Like that, actually, here's another big thing that changed. When I was younger, I used to really think in a goal-oriented way. And not only that, but I used to think like, I'm going to hit all these milestones in my life. And as I hit them, I'll just be happy the whole time because I got this plan mapped out and that's what I want to do and whatever else. But if I talk to a younger version of myself about the things that I'm doing now, the gap between what I thought I would be doing and what I'm actually doing is unfathomable. Like there's no way the past version of me would be able to think that I'm in the place that I am doing what I'm doing. So another piece that has changed for me is realizing that trying to set out sort of like a bigger overarching plan that's really detailed is not fruitful. Now, it does make sense to sort of like pick a direction, or at least it has for me, right? To have sort of something I'm working towards or a direction I'm trying to go or things that I'm trying to figure out. That works. But just thinking like, okay, by this age, I'll have this thing and this by this time and this by this thing. And I will definitely be working at this place or in this industry or on this specific product. That just hasn't been the case at all.
Yeah, I would say I was just looking back at my younger version of myself and what I thought I would have by the time I was 30. I was like, oh, I'll be married, I have kids, I'll have my medical degree, I'll be super successful. Like Didn't quite happen by 30, and it took a little bit longer. I mean, I just got married at 36 last year, and still don't have kids, and that's the continuous process. But I will say that even though maybe my younger version of myself would be disappointed that I haven't achieved what I had set out when I was in my 20s, my present self will say that I'm actually happy where I am right now. It's like everything happened in the way that it needed to. And yeah, I like my life. and and yes, I'm still pursuing those same goals, but I'm not as like being, oh, well, I can't be happy now because I didn't achieve it in the timeline that I set out for myself. Yeah.
I think that's one of the very, very common things that people can get hooked into that makes them unhappy, is sort of anchoring on, oh, I had these aspirations for myself or whatever else, and look where I am now. I'm not where I want to be, as opposed to looking, at the journey for what it is, taking the things that are valuable out of it and being realistic, right? Because I know for myself, a lot of that stuff was just not realistic. And there was also a lot of struggles, challenges, and opportunities that came up that sort of angled me down in a different path than sort of this rigid endpoint that I had imagined.
Yeah, for sure. All right. I think we covered this topic pretty well. Is there any last minute thoughts that you had?
No, just wanted to make sure that it's clear that sort of, as like these things continuously evolve, right? And it's not, I mean, I'm sure neither of us have kids at the moment. I'm sure if that changes, we're going to find a whole new set of different things to derive happiness from,
right.
Things that we care about. But yeah, just hitting that last point again, where flexibility in sort of the way that you let your life unfold, like figuring out the things that actually make you happy,
right,
and not getting lost on sort of these tangential things that are sort of kind of close, right? Like make 6 figures a year, sort of kind of close, but not actually the thing that provides happiness. Just rooting down into those things a little bit better at any stage in life is going to be very fruitful, because I know I wasted a lot of time just walking on those sort of close but not quite the correct path and being really frustrated about it.
Yeah, I can relate. And I think it's just an ongoing process of reflecting on what's really important to you and what actually brings you joy, which I think you have to go through that period of being off the path, or kind of learning that doesn't work, to figure out what does eventually. So it's all part of the process. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in this week. If you want to share what made you happy as a kid or as a teen or as an adult, feel free to do so in the comments, and spread the happiness in the world by liking, subscribing, sharing, all the things that help us get out in the world. All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. And if you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.